In 2015, researchers at the University of Michigan coined a new term, Egyptomania. It was the word they used to describe the near-obsessive fascination people have for ancient Egypt, a civilization that thrived for more than 3 millennia, and left such an enduring mark on history that, thousands of years later, we are still uncovering its mysteries. Ancient Egypt began around 3150 BC, when the lands along the Nile were unified under the first pharaoh, and it ended in 30 BC with the death of Cleopatra. Soon after, the country became a province of the Roman Empire. Over the course of more than 3,000 years, Egypt witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties, the birth of groundbreaking inventions and monumental architecture, and the flourishing of a culture so radiant and distinctive that there has never been anything else like it on Earth. Yet when most of us picture ancient Egypt, we think only of the pyramids, the Sphinx, or walls covered in hieroglyphs. Few remember that the Earth itself looked very different back then. The climate was cooler and wetter, the Nile River broader and greener, and the lands along its banks were lush with vegetation, home to herds of wild animals that have long since vanished from the region. In that golden age, Egypt was not only the cradle of powerful pharaohs, but also the home of massive predators, great herds of grazing animals, and birds so tall they could stand eye to eye with a grown person. Some of these species still survive in other parts of the world, while others have vanished forever, and their story reveals a side of this civilization where history and nature merge into one magnificent and untamed picture. The aurochs, Bos primigenius. The aurochs, scientifically known as Bos primigenius, was once among the most magnificent creatures to walk the lands of ancient Egypt. It was the wild ancestor of today's domestic cattle, but in both size and stature, it far surpassed any modern breed. A fully grown adult could weigh anywhere from 750 kilograms to over 1.5 tons, stand nearly 2 meters tall at the shoulder, and possess a solid, muscular frame with clearly defined muscle groups. Its long, sweeping horns could reach up to 80 centimeters in length, jutting outward from the sides before curving forward in a dramatic arc. One glimpse of an aurochs from a distance was enough to understand why the ancient Egyptians saw it as the embodiment of strength and endurance. Despite its imposing build, the aurochs was far from gentle. They were notorious for their aggressive nature, especially during mating season, when males would fight with such ferocity that these clashes could end in death. Unlike the large, densely packed herds of domestic cattle we see today, aurochs typically lived in small groups, moving with the seasons to seek out lush grazing lands and abundant water sources. Their relatively small numbers and unpredictable temperament made hunting them both dangerous and a test of considerable skill. For the ancient Egyptians, the aurochs was a valuable source of meat, hide, and bone. Its meat provided highly nutritious food, while the hide was tanned into shields, ropes, or clothing. The bones could be fashioned into tools and decorative objects. Archaeological evidence suggests, however, that the Egyptians did more than simply hunt them. On occasion, they may have kept aurochs in limited captivity, perhaps to secure a steady supply of meat or for use in religious ceremonies. The decline of the aurochs in Egypt was the result of multiple factors. Expanding farmland steadily reduced their natural habitat, while the growing pressure of hunting caused their numbers to dwindle sharply. Eventually, the aurochs vanished from the region, surviving only in art and in fragments of bone uncovered by archaeologists. But their story didn't end there. In other parts of Europe and Asia, aurochs herds continued to roam for thousands more years. The very last known aurochs lived in the Yaktorow forest in Poland, dying in 1627. A moment that marked the final chapter for a creature that had once been a symbol of power and vitality, from an age when humans and nature still stood on that thin, shifting line between cooperation and confrontation. The Bennu heron. Amid the lush wetlands that once lined the banks of the ancient Nile, there lived a giant bird that made anyone who saw it look up in awe. Modern researchers call it the Bennu heron, a towering species that could stand nearly 2 meters tall, with a wingspan exceeding 2.7 meters. When it spread its wings, its shadow could cover an entire small boat drifting down the Nile, creating a scene at once majestic and mysterious. The Bennu heron thrived in the river's floodplains and lakes, where food was abundant year-round, It hunted in the classic heron style, standing perfectly still until the right moment, then striking with lightning speed to snatch its prey. Its menu was far more varied than that of ordinary herons: fish, turtles, frogs, snakes, small mammals, and even young sharks when the opportunity arose. Its immense size and diverse hunting skills made the Bennu heron the undisputed apex predator of the wetlands it called home. For the ancient Egyptians, the Bennu heron was far more than just a bird. Its form and behavior inspired the image of the god Bennu, a deity closely tied to the sun. In mythology, Bennu was often described as the first being to emerge from the primeval waters, heralding the dawn of time itself. This belief was so deeply ingrained that depictions of Bennu appeared on temple reliefs, wall paintings, and ceremonial objects, always associated with the light and vitality of life. Reverence for the bird extended even into funerary customs. Archaeologists have found Bennu heron remains buried alongside human mummies, likely as a symbolic protector for the soul on its journey to the afterlife. To the Egyptians, taking the image of Bennu into death may have been akin to carrying with them a promise of rebirth. Yet even a creature once revered could not escape extinction. Around 1800 BC, the Bennu heron vanished from both the fossil record and Egyptian writings. Its disappearance may have been caused by overhunting, combined with shrinking habitat as the climate grew drier and humans expanded irrigation projects. Wetlands that had once been its paradise diminished, food sources dwindled, and the bird was slowly pushed to the brink. Today, the story of the Bennu heron survives only in fragments of stone carvings and ancient legend. But for the people of ancient Egypt, the vision of a giant bird soaring across the dawn sky above the Nile would forever remain an immortal emblem of creation and the eternal cycle of life. The Maidum goose. Among the creatures that have vanished from ancient Egypt, the Maidum goose stands as one of the most extraordinary and perhaps unique cases in natural history. No bones, no fossils, no physical remains of this species have ever been found. Yet we know of it because of a single painting, more than 4,600 years old, on the wall of a tomb at Maidum, an archaeological site south of Cairo. That painting is so famous it has been called the Mona Lisa of Egypt, not only for its artistic beauty, but because it serves as the only window into the appearance of a species lost to time. In the artwork, the Maidum geese are shown with intricately patterned feathers and colors unlike any living goose species. Some are depicted with heads bent down, foraging on the sandy ground. Others stand tall and alert. It is more than a portrait of beauty. It captures a realistic moment. The birds caught in net traps, about to be taken and offered as tribute to nobles or royalty. The detail in the painting has fueled debate among scientists. Some ornithologists suggest that the birds might have been red-breasted geese, a species still found in certain parts of the world. But when examined closely, the feather patterns and coloration in the painting do not match perfectly, and the ancient Egyptians were remarkably precise in their depictions of animals. This makes the artistic license theory less convincing and strengthens the possibility that the Maidum goose was indeed a distinct species, now completely extinct. What makes this case so remarkable is that everything we know about the Maidum goose comes from a single piece of art, the brushstrokes of an Egyptian artisan working thousands of years ago. Yet the painting is vivid enough to convey the living presence of a bird that once foraged along the Nile and played a role in daily life. Today, the Maidum goose remains a symbol of the remarkable bridge between art and science. A work that might once have been valued only for its decorative beauty has become an irreplaceable scientific record, proof that, alongside the pyramids and towering monuments, ancient Egypt also had its quiet, ordinary moments, where even a small bird could leave a lasting mark on human history. The North African elephant. Across the grasslands, deserts, and wetlands of ancient North Africa, there once roamed a species of elephant smaller than its African savanna cousins, yet still immense and awe-inspiring to the people of its time. This was the North African elephant, a subspecies of the African elephant, only slightly larger than the Asian elephant. It had larger ears than its Asian relative, a back that sloped gently downward, and long, elegantly curved tusks that extended forward. Though not a giant among elephants, it was still a powerful and impressive creature, one that left a lasting mark on the history of the Mediterranean and the Middle East. The North African elephant's range once stretched across much of the continent, from the coasts to open woodlands and savannas. In Egypt, however, they were already rare. Centuries of hunting and habitat loss had reduced their numbers long before the height of Egyptian civilization. The survivors roamed in remote areas, but as humans expanded farmland and increased resource extraction, their territory shrank further and further. Their presence in the lives of ancient Egyptians was not always peaceful. They frequently raided crops, trampling fields and collapsing simple structures as they moved through human settlements. This made them targets, not only to protect agriculture, but also because of the high value of their ivory. White tusks were prized for jewelry and ceremonial objects, further sealing the elephant's fate. Beyond hunting, North African elephants were sometimes captured alive for entirely different purposes. They were trained for war, pulling chariots or carrying soldiers and weapons on their backs. During Egypt's 12th dynasty, the use of war elephants was seen as a symbol of military might. However, keeping and training elephants demanded enormous resources, and many died young, unable to adapt to captivity. The decline of the North African elephant was not limited to Egypt. Over the centuries, they vanished from one region after another, disappearing entirely by the 4th century AD. A major factor in their extinction came during the Roman era, when elephants were captured in large numbers and brought into the arenas for bloody spectacles. There, they were forced to fight wild beasts, or even humans, until they collapsed from exhaustion and died. Today, the North African elephant survives only in ancient stories and in the carvings etched into temple walls. Yet their legacy endures, not only through the battles and ceremonies they once took part in, but also as a stark reminder of the price nature pays when human ambition and profit come first. The Nile hippopotamus. In the memory of ancient Egypt, few animals were as deeply intertwined and as conflicted in their relationship with humans as the Nile hippopotamus. It belonged to the same species as modern African hippos, but it became locally extinct in Egypt due to environmental changes and human pressure. In ancient times, hippos were a familiar part of the riverbank landscape, where the Nile opened into muddy shallows and fertile marshes. There, they spent most of the day submerged in cool water to escape the searing heat, coming ashore at night to graze. Yet the relationship between hippos and the Egyptians was fraught with tension. Large herds could devastate crops in a single night, crushing embankments and flattening fields. They were not only agricultural pests, but also a serious threat to human safety. Hippos are unpredictable by nature and particularly aggressive when disturbed. They were known to attack fishing or transport boats on the river, kill livestock, and occasionally kill people. Legend holds that King Menes, the first pharaoh to unite Egypt, met his end in a hippopotamus attack, a story that illustrates the formidable power of this animal. To protect their fields and communities, the ancient Egyptians launched large-scale hippo hunts. Pharaohs and nobles often took part, not only for practical reasons, but also as a display of authority. On temple reliefs, scenes of hippo hunts depict the king standing in a boat, thrusting a spear into a massive, thrashing animal in the water. These images were both literal and symbolic. Victory over the hippopotamus was seen as victory over chaos, restoring order to the kingdom. Over the centuries, relentless hunting drove hippos further and further upriver. The spread of agriculture and riverside settlements steadily reduced their habitat. By the early 19th century, hippos could still be found in Egypt, but only in small numbers and in remote areas. Soon after, they disappeared entirely from the region, leaving behind only stories and artistic depictions as the last evidence of a time when the Nile was home to one of Africa's most powerful and feared creatures. Beyond the famous aurochs and Nile hippopotamus, ancient Egypt was once home to many other wild animals that have now vanished from its lands. On the grassy plains near the desert, giraffes once strode gracefully, their long necks reaching into acacia trees to strip the leaves. In the arid regions, addax antelopes, with their long spiral horns, endured the harsh climate by going for weeks without water. spotted hyenas, with jaws strong enough to crush bone, prowled the desert edges in search of carrion or weaker prey. Even baboons, so closely tied to the imagery and beliefs of ancient Egypt, once lived in large numbers along the Nile. All these species, which together created a vibrant and richly varied natural world, now survive only in paintings, relief carvings, and archaeological artifacts. Their disappearance reflects a long process in which the climate grew drier, the desert advanced, and humans expanded farming and hunting. From a land once lush with extraordinary biodiversity, Egypt gradually transformed into a harsher, less wild landscape than it had been 4,000 years ago. If you enjoyed this journey into the animals that once lived alongside the civilization of ancient Egypt, be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss future explorations. And don't forget to share this video, because behind the grandeur of the pyramids lies an entire wild world that has vanished forever.